All right, everyone, welcome back to Masari's Unqualified Opinions. I'm Ryan Selkis at 2-Bit Idiots. Very excited to be hosting a conversation with Mike Dudas, founder and CEO of The Block. Controversial figure, firebrand, ultimately a phenomenal brand builder. So I'm not talking about myself in the third person, but people, I think on my team at least, maybe on Mike's team as well, have often sent around the Spider-Man meme of two people pointing at each other when it comes to Mike and I going off on Twitter. So, Mike, it's great to have this conversation finally. I think it's been long overdue. But before we get too deep into the weeds here, would love to just have you introduce yourself and most importantly, give a little bit of the backstory, not only of The Block, but just your personal journey down the crypto rabbit hole over the last couple of years.
Thanks, Ryan. Excited to do that. Yeah, you and I met a couple of years ago, and it was in the context of a Telegram group, and that was candidly my first foray into the wilds of, we'll call it sort of crypto. Well, now it's crypto Twitter is the word, but sort of all the crypto social media. It's a sort of a wild environment, and it was eye-opening for me to jump from traditional tech and business and fintech into the crypto ecosystem. It's 2 years later from when I originally met you. I feel about twice as old, twice as heavy, and half the. No, I'm kidding. So it's been a wild couple of years. But to your question, so entered the space so full time, as I just described, right when things were rushing up and crescendoing. But I've been a Bitcoin owner since 2013. For all the hackers out there, you're welcome. Like Ryan, I enjoy talking about all of my security issues publicly, and that's why I get along so well. The thing that drew me to Bitcoin, I've in 2010 joined Google's wallet team and spent 4 years on that team. It was a decade too early to mobile payments in America. I've been early on a number of things. Was early at Venmo, which was acquired by Braintree because it was a little too early to P2P payments. And before that, I worked on online music in the late aughts. So that was a decade early as well. But joined after working in fintech, Venmo at Google for a number of years, working while I was at Braintree, meeting with the Coinbase team to talk about Bitcoin payments in 2013. And really being a little bit disillusioned. And I think we're still seeing this continue today with every fintech company out there seemingly having the aspiration, perhaps other than Stripe and Square and Shopify, which is sort of fintech-y adjacent, to sell to a big bank or financial institution. I wanted to actually work on what would hopefully be disrupting financial institutions in the way that we describe them, and the way they're regulated by the U.S. government and other governments over the next few decades. And discovering Bitcoin in 2013, not participating and being on the outskirts, but seeing it from a formal industry perspective, got me excited about the potential. Slightly aware of the risks, the personalities, the complexity. And then when I decided to jump in full time, holy shit, it was like awesome, terrifying, confusing, and just a trigger for all of my good and bad sides, as well as seemingly everybody else who was participating. And I probably monologued for 5 minutes now, so I'll stop here. But looking at this confusing, volatile space at a time when it was growing seemingly exponentially was simultaneously amazing, scary, and just saw I think what you saw around. I mean, you've been full time for a long time, but a dearth of reliable, real, credible information that led people to do really stupid and outrageous things.
And that gets us to the core of what the block is. I don't want to go out on a limb and describe the block
Yeah.
because I know that you're just going to correct me with some ostentatious
I'll try
vision
my best not
of
to.
everything that you hope to do and more.
Yeah.
People look at the block, they see a media outlet that's competing with CoinDesk. I think you yourself have been vocal about winning business away from
Absolutely.
CoinDesk and growing the audience. You've obviously got a very strong team of researchers that are omnipresent on Twitter in a good way.
Yeah.
A lot of the content has been exceptional. How do you describe the block, and where are we now in terms of its evolution? Because hi Frank.
Frank, yeah. Frank went for a run, which typically 12-minute pace, half walk, half run.
There you go, man.
Yeah. He didn't bring the sweat, which is bad news.
So maybe you can think about the block in terms of caricatures, Frank being the media elements, and then other folks being the research element. But how does this business align with your original vision to just improve information in the industry, and where do you think you are now versus where you want to be?
So the original tagline was crypto simplified. And while we strive to do that, it doesn't describe, what we do in its entirety. So we've expanded that into the first and final word in digital assets. And what that means really is, we're not just simplifying things so you can understand them, but we'd like to be the first place you look to figure out what the heck's going on in this space. And we define the space pretty broadly. So it's not just covering public, blockchains and cryptocurrencies. So not just covering Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripples, and, Bcash, et cetera. It's covering central bank digital currencies. It's covering distributed ledger technology and stuff that is adjacent. So companies that are using the technology and governments that are thinking about money in new ways. The original idea and concept was, again, crypto simplified, and it was hatched at a time when there was a lot more momentum behind, let's just say, everyday people's interest in learning more and going really deep into the technology. What happened is, in 2018, as we started to form the brand and launch the brand, we realized we had incredible talent. Stephen, Frank, Larry, editorial talent that was super experienced, had experience in various aspects of cryptocurrency, and blockchain and fintech analysis and research. And so we launched, not really a crypto simplified brand, but one that had insider knowledge. People gravitated towards. All of our content was free in 2018. And that was the original, vision for the business was, in 2018, hundreds of millions of people will be interested in this, imminent revolution that's happening today. What has clearly happened is everybody took a deep breath, certainly we did, and said, hey, this is going to be a multi-year, multi-decade evolution with incredible things happening, ups, downs, and everything in between. Just like I think a lot of technology and a lot of financial markets over throughout history. Okay, so where we've come out is we are focused on, instead of sort of blockchain 101, call it somewhere between crypto blockchain 201 and above, and it's enough that if you're somebody who's aware of what's going on, you can kind of start with our news and journalism. That's our top of funnel. That's where most people are aware of the block, the news and journalism brand. And then we will, through, as you mentioned, our social accounts and through our personal accounts, we basically tighten the funnel and connect to the folks who are actually participating fully in the market. And then we sell solutions, as including research, data, information. We can talk more about where we're headed with that.
What's the X for Y comparison? Because I think of a lot of what you've done with the Genesis product is the information, but crypto specific.
Yeah. So that's the starting point. And I think with with this product, we go deeper than that. So it's probably closer today to CB Insights. I don't think that the information doesn't have a research team that sort of charts things out and has they're more journalists than deep. I mean, they go deep as journalists, but just they don't have folks who have deep economics backgrounds, technology backgrounds, etc. on their team. And so bringing that in house, we think it's key to the media and information model long term. I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, you mentioned the information. It's a phenomenal brand. I'm a subscriber. I love it. And pay for it out of pocket, personally, not corporate. So I think long term, you'll see them, go in there and get product managers. Sam Lesson's the product manager, right? He writes quite a bit for them and does a tremendous job. And they'll do more of that, is what I would imagine. That's how you go up the price funnel. So we go all the way up the price funnel, from charging a retail subscription fee all the way to charging enterprise research, consulting, engagement, and services fees. But really, we don't call them fees. I mean, they're partnerships. So we align with companies, brands in the crypto and blockchain space, like Masari does, and we enter into longer term relationships with them to help inform them across the news and journalism, research, and information services spectrum.
You said something probably unintentionally early on when I asked you about the direction of the business and kind of how you think about things, and you referenced we cover all sorts of digital assets, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then you said Ripples and Bcash, and it was very subtle. I don't know how many people would have caught it, but this is in keeping with what is otherwise positioned, at least early on, as a very brash and at times in your face, no holds barred brands. Ripples, folks in the XRP army would take exception to, because they'd say Ripple is the company and XRP is the currency. Bcash, there's the infamous scene of Roger Ver, flipping off the camera and having it become a meme because he wants it to be referred to as Bitcoin Cash, not Bcash.
Or just Bitcoin.
Yeah, or just Bitcoin. And how casually you said that, I think, belies the charge that's underneath there, and that's consistent with the brand that you built early on. What is the ongoing direction that you want to take with the tone and the brand, not just of the site itself, but of all of the component parts? Because we talked about. When you first got into the industry, the Telegram channels and just the tone and tenor of Twitter and Telegram, and the general heat that comes along with people, getting very rabid about these discussions within the industry. There's an element where that kind of fits in, but is very much at odds with more traditional, journalistic or research outlets. But you've been able to, at least from all appearances, toe the line so far without it becoming a brand issue or something that jeopardizes audience trust or user growth. How has it been managing that fine line of being brash enough where people pay attention, but not going overboard, or when you do, kind of self-correcting as an outlet and within each individual who's ultimately representative of the brand?
Yeah. So, it's 2020. When people get information today, if you take it from our president on down, they want information, but they want it delivered, with context, with personality, and with context. And you can define those things, how you want them, but they don't want a sort of monotone news anchor delivering them bullshit that they know is bullshit, right? Like that's how we've gotten information for far too long. So for starters, the reason we exist is to deliver meaningful information in a tone that's accessible, meaning like you either relate or you don't to people on our team, but we have a diversity of thinking, perspectives, and opinion, such that you're going to find somebody on the team that you do kind of relate to, and they're going to give you their thinking in an unfiltered way. Like, you are the audience just as much as somebody else who is completely diametrically opposed to your point of view, but we're seeking, there's no such thing as an objective truth for most of the things that we're talking about in this space. So if there's anything I've moved away from, it's being tribal. It's saying there's, an objective truth. And a way to move away from that is to be open, to laugh, to be expressive, to be emotive. And hell, some people don't like that, right? They want to tell you how to think, how to be, and they basically want to tell you that everything's happening within the mental construct that they've created for society, for money, for how you should interact with institutions of their choosing and definition. And so there's nothing like that at the block. Like, it's just a bunch of people who are way smarter than me, who are super passionate about what they do, who care about their professions, whether it be journalism or research or building the best technology, and care deeply about money and about technology and about how those things intersect and how they're changing. So a long-winded way of saying our personality is that, like, we're fiery, fun, accessible, and telling you what matters, but we have to be smart as hell, and I'm not. So I let the team do more of that now, right? Like, if you saw in 2018, 19, I was getting into trouble being the voice of the brand, because guess what? I don't like, I started the company and started with a wonderful group of folks, but what's happened is the ecosystem has fundamentally changed since then. It doesn't care about personalities. It doesn't care about me or you. It just cares, like, people just want something they can trust, that's reliable. It's embodied by, obviously, Satoshi being anonymous, but they want, information delivered to them. They want it, I think, again, to be all the things that I just said: accessible, funny, easy to relate to. But I think they then want to laugh at the ideas, take them in people want to discuss the ideas, digest them, and have it be in more of kind of in a, forget the vessel. If I say something and, Bitcoin maximalist Saifuddin Ammous says something and it's the same thing, and it's like, Bitcoin solves this, coming from me today, because it's me as the vessel. It could be the exact same words and the exact same thing. You'd have 200 irate trolly comments on me saying that publicly on Twitter, versus him saying it would be like plaudits, 4,000 retweets. It'd be like Bitcoin rockets. So, there's just so much, angst and intensity and conviction and ideas tied up in people's identity. We try and strip all that away, take it off of any one person, and just have a ton of fun. And that's why you see, if Larry Cermak or Frank Chaparro or Ryan Todd or Teo Leibowitz or Stephen Zhang or Celia Wan or Yunlin Cheng, anybody on our team says something publicly, everybody loves it and they jump in. They have a freaking blast. We all have so much fun because we like talking to one another. Hey, I mean, we get annoyed just like any other team, but you can see kind of the humanity and we're having, and I think that attracts people, and it's a lot more interesting than what CoinDesk does, where everybody, for a while seemed to be kind of going through the motions, like, hey, we're just putting out some content, and Barry just had us move in with them, and that's annoying. And then they had Michael take, Casey take over, and a few other folks take over, and now they're like a big multimedia house. But there's not the sincerity that you see from our team, and that editorial sincerity and voice is what people are looking for. And it has to stay with the brand versus the people. So we've really worked hard at that. Thanks for letting me just talk myself into a hole for 8 minutes.
Well, that's what this is all about. I try not to interrupt when someone's on a roll. I think
you'll edit that one down to 2 minutes, right?
I don't edit this, unfortunately for you. So, I mean, something that's, I don't want to get too much into
Yeah.
the block versus CoinDesk, because you're
Yep.
obviously, going to be partial, and I've got some history there myself. So,
By the way, they're doing quality work. So that
we,
was,
yeah, I mean, what I was going to reference was more, it was interesting that Mike McSweeney joined you guys recently amidst some of that shuffle, because he was the last kind of core, like early CoinDesker.
Totally.
And seems like he's gone, some might say, to the light side or to the dark side, depending on their perspective, to join the block. But one way or the other, I found that to be a pretty telling move. Going back to the comment, though, it's one thing to be lighthearted and and have fun with it, and just be part of what I think is the general cultural vibe of crypto Twitter, which is to be snarkier, to be a little bit rough around the edges, and at times confrontational, which is fine. You could argue it's healthy, but at what point, there is no objective truth. But if you take the assumption that everybody in your team is going to be opinionated, how do you minimize mistakes? Because you can look at any asset at all within crypto, and a different audience will say it is a scam for XYZ reasons. It is the greatest thing in the world for ABC reasons. And often there's very little gray area in between.
How do you define mistake, I guess, is my first question. When you say
Well,
mistakes.
Minimize mistakes. I wouldn't say factual mistakes, but just directional errors, right? And a good example is, you mentioned being open to change your mind. I know that you're kind of publicly a Bitcoin maximalist for a while, until you failed some purity test and was evicted from the tribe, right? So, I had a similar interaction experience more recently with Justin Sun, and I'm not saying that I'm a convert to TRX, because I don't own that. I own very few assets.
Yeah.
But if you look at Flipside Crypto, which is an independent analytics firm that kind of runs all these different tests to create like a crypto asset score using this matrix approach for developer activity and markets, whatever, they score fairly highly. And then you look at some of the M&A activity, where you were basically able to use seniorage and acquire actual businesses that are legitimate. BitTorrent, Poloniex, at least, kind of the shell of its former self, but nonetheless exists. There's an element where a project like that, which especially in the West has been just completely shot on and derided, you wonder if they're going to basically be able to fake it till they make it. And even if you're a cynic, right? And then on the other hand, if you're too overboard and effusive in the praise of Bitcoin or Ether, which I know you have various folks in the team that are maybe much more bullish on that and bearish on pretty much everything else, you run the risk of missing out on some of these tail events that take you off guard and maybe question some of your assumptions. So I'm using those as kind of the placeholders for what I think is a much broader point. We have our portfolios, and then we have what we think is going to be true, and then there's what's actually going to happen. And in the 7 years that I've been in the industry, the one thing I know for sure is what's actually going to happen is not going to be what I bet on perfectly. Do you box yourself into a corner with a more opinionated form of journalism and research, especially if you're wrong, and you're wrong in a big way, and you piss off like a team or community that ultimately emerges as one of the big winners in this ecosystem?
Yeah, perhaps. It's certainly a risk. I think it gets back to how you frame this at the beginning, which is I think it was something along the lines of, how do you avoid mistakes? And we're not a team that, I guess, we don't approach things from a risk mitigation perspective, and that's clear, right? We go out there with our hearts and minds, and then we have a process and a team. I don't want to speak. I genuinely do not participate in editorial at the block, and people joke about this and laugh, in various places. But yeah, I'm not on the mailing list, the emails, the Slack chats. where a lot of the activity happens, and I don't engage, in the office in those sorts of conversations. So it's hard for me to speak to the editorial process in terms of what we choose to cover. What I will say is, in terms of the team creation process, the idea is geographical and sort of topic and affinity diversity. So meaning, you mentioned Bitcoin and Ethereum, and we have folks who are quote unquote maximalists, perhaps in owning those specific tokens or a collection of them. But when you put them up against other members of the team, they diverge. And so we're fortunate enough to have a big enough team where you have folks who hold different coins and believe different things. So that's good. And then you're never like the audience, again, the recipient of what we're delivering is, it's so many people, and we owe it to all of them to cover things pretty broadly that are important. So then there's so there's always the risk, and this is what you're getting at, with taking strong positions, but that's how you make I think that's how you make people aware that you stand for something, truth. And what we find is, some of the projects that we cover with skepticism, or some of the people, are avid readers and respect us. I think the key is respecting them. So if I do think there are times, certainly when there are folks on our team who perhaps you get flippant, or like the key here is like we're serving to put information out there that is high signal, high value, and you compromise that if you get if you seem if there's any sort of if you get biased, and you balance that with a need to tell a truth. And so I think that I know for a fact, I keep saying I know. So we give respect to teams that are more honest, that in Ryan Selkis's view of the world, disclose fully on the Masari registry, are completely transparent, and are open books. And guess what? Like, there's not too many of those teams. So what we have going in our favor is, if you're out there on record as having copied, somebody's white paper, if you're out there on record as having lied about the creation of your token, well, guess what? You've lost the benefit of the doubt, and you are not to be trusted. And therefore, in my view of the world, and I think in most reasonable people's view of the world, there's going to be an additional layer of skepticism, because you had those foundational gaps and problems that you're not addressing, that you've moved past. And this is my personal view. I'm not speaking for my editorial team, but my personal view on the world is people should be skeptical of you, particularly in an ecosystem and a world where we're saying, we're moving to trustless, decentralized protocols and processes. Well, for Christ's sake, like, if your origin is, basically mired in murk and dishonesty potentially, then I think people are absolutely going to, and justified in, questioning what happens after that with a higher level of scrutiny. It's just human nature, and it makes sense, like, based on the evidence given by you to the world.
So you made all the requisite disclaimers that you're not in the Slack channels, you don't make editorial decisions and everything. So maybe you can be a little bit more flippant then. And we can do a lightning round of what you actually think of the top 10 currencies.
Go.
All right. So we'll start with the big daddy, Bitcoin.
Store of value. I hope that someday it becomes a medium of exchange.
Ether.
It's migrating.
Okay.
I mean, decentralized finance, open finance, and the best group. Best group of developers in the ecosystem.
You don't have to backtrack. It's migrating was the hottest form of that take. XRP.
Ripples.
Bitcoin Cash.
Bcash.
Bitcoin SV.
That's on the top 10 still? Goner.
Tether.
Oh boy, I don't want to get hit.
Litecoin.
Keep my mouth shut. I mean, yeah, there's no purpose.
Chainlink.
Wow, Oracle token manipulated.
EOS.
Oh boy. Nice fundraise.
Tezos.
The Brightmans do not like me. What power?
All right, man.
All right, there you go. That was the window
10.
into
I
my
can
going to
feel
20. Yeah.
No, man. I can feel you getting hot. You're like, oh man, the team's gonna
Oh boy.
fucking kill me for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No. There. So the beauty of crypto is, Bitcoin's for the longest journey. Ethereum is as well. Most of the other tokens you mentioned are 2 to 3 years old, so early, and amazing things could happen. They're all startup experiments, and the reason for the jokes and skepticism is just, look, the valuations are crazy, the expectations are crazy, but yeah, there's some things in there that are going to be really interesting experiments.
What do you think the biggest misconception that people have is of either the block as a brand or group of folks, or of you in particular?
Yeah,
because I will say, I think most people, I don't know how many people have seen you do interviews. I think you've only done a couple, maybe at this point.
Yeah.
And there's a pretty massive delta between you on camera or on a podcast or in person and what people see online.
Yeah. So people, we're a team that when we do our best work offline, in terms of our thinking, or not offline, but off social media. So they're the research team, our journalism team, like, they are exceptional folks. I have no doubt that if we just zipped everything up and shut off the social accounts and those didn't exist, and then we would be viewed as the most authoritative, positive information force in this space, along with Masari on the, of course, data registry, disclosure, and project side. The thing is, they're like a lot of really good people. It's honestly one of the closest, most fun teams, and I'm an outlier of it. But the editorial team is so close, and it's just fun to watch, them interact, and they're really incredible. So we all get along. We give each other a hard time. We have a ton of fun, and there's on the team, there's none of this angst and this feeling of like X doesn't like Y or any of that. It's really it really is a fun, curious, thoughtful team. So I think, by the way, people are appreciating that. Like when we do the one-to-one meeting, when I talk to you in person, it's always like gracious and fun. And the key as we grow up and as this space grows up is that more of this happens and less of the nonsense that I wouldn't speak for my team, who I think has been really professional. But the work that we put down, like if you just looked at our website, I'm really proud of it.
Well, there's a saying in politics: when you're behind in the polls, you go negative. And then once you're the front runner, you basically just let your work speak for itself, or just kind of run on autopilot. So there's no reason to punch down.
I would say that's happening. I mean, and if I know you and I look at you as well, and I don't want to speak for you, but my sense is you ran hotter in the past, than maybe perhaps, and I think you've got more of a sage wisdom now that blends and matches with that. I'm trying to and feel like the same. I don't know if that's a project, but it's important. And I think the space is that, like, it was pretty ugly last year all around, certainly in the beginning, price was down. It was, there are people that I'm friends with now. You have some of the ex CoinDesk folks. And it's, so I'm happy. It's been by the way, the last couple of months have been so fun. Our traffic's way up. I've talked to other publications in the space and information sources. Their traffic's way up. Price is up. Like, it's I don't want to pop the champagne too early, but it's a heck of a lot of fun. We're out, talking to all kinds of folks, prospective customers, always talking to investors, other people in the space. Like, so much optimism, even just relative to October, November of last year.
Yeah, it is weird, and I've been through a couple of these cycles full time now.
Yeah.
You know, everybody is very chummy and excited to see each other when there's like an upward moving chart.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a lot of high fives to go around. But in the bear markets, the knives come out, and they are vicious.
Yeah, and there's definitely some bodies there, you know, like in terms of relationships that probably won't come back, and that's, you know, I think that's for the best. Like when you're in a space this volatile in terms of technology, in terms of the religious fervor that so many of these communities have, and in terms of the stakes from a, you know, money perspective, yeah, you're going to get some disagreement, and you're going to get some people who probably don't like each other a lot, and I think that's totally fine. And this space is almost too comfortable embracing, you know, the dislike. So I think it's fine to just say, hey, you know, we're not gonna communicate, and that's a good thing. Let's move on. Let's keep it off, keep it out of other folks' eyes, and, you know, be professionals. And I've had a couple folks do that with me. It's been wonderful over the past couple months, I think. It's
even if you're not interfering with editorial, you de facto have a say in the direction of coverage, just by virtue of, you know, what systems that you build on the back end, or you know, which elements of the business you build, like this, you know, this conference that you got coming up. How do you think about expansion into new areas, or being reactive to news cycles versus trying to invest heavily in something like that might be more of an emerging trend? Because I think anyone that's in an information business might say that they're trying to peer around the corner and get, you know, a leg up, and be first to market. But at the end of the day, you go where the audience eyeballs are, and where they tell you to go. And I don't think many people recognize that investigative journalism and hardcore research only works if people give a shit about the subject. So you can be too early on certain stories because people just don't give a shit because the stakes are too small, or is too early in you know, a different sector's lifestyle. Obviously the death knell is if you're too late, you've missed something highly relevant, because then your audience just starts to trust someone else. Is that something that you focus on, or is that at this point completely delegated to, you know, folks like, you know, Mike and Larry and folks on the research side?
Yeah, so it is now completely delegated. As soon as, you know, Mike started, you know, Mike and Frank and Celia, our team is on the journalism side. They decide long term, hey, who are we? What are we selling to folks, you know, to the audience who's, you know, observing for free, but also the folks who are paying, and, you know, putting together just a range of topics. But it all boils down to who is the audience. You know, McSweeney likes to talk about them a lot, and then what are we, you know, what do we want to tell them, and how do we want to tell it? On the research side, it's been really a well-oiled machine for a year plus now. And it's really an incredible team. So, you know, we cover Bitcoin and Ethereum primarily. The gentleman downstairs just started drilling, so you may get the background. But anyway, you cover Bitcoin, Ethereum the most, Bitcoin more than Ethereum, and then, you know, everything else, not according to market cap, but so we're constantly putting signals. I think right now, so I don't get a say, honestly. And I would say, hopefully the team will watch this next week, that we're maybe a little too cautious and not reporting on stuff that's around the corner, and the investigative journalism. I want to see that dialed back up. So hopefully they're watching. You know, I think we're catering to the customer.
Well, they're going to be watching just with bated breath to make sure that I didn't get you guys into trouble, or that more likely than not you didn't get them into trouble.
Right.
What do you say to folks that push back on just paying for content, number one, and then the skepticism that I hear mostly around people paying for subscriptions generally boils down to, well, all this information is already available somewhere. You know, I'm just going to use XYZ free resources. And if you take the approach that most journalists only have 50% of the story, right? Some people are very skeptical of journalism as a model in general. If they only know 50% of the story, would you rather just have like a mosaic of different first party accounts for how a given industry works, or how a given news story is evolving? What would you argue is the value of independent editorial research brands in a market where you might say that there's as much or more value in just keeping all of that information in-house and trading on it on the one hand, or just running some aggregation portal?
Yeah. So first of all, it depends on the team, right? But there's meaning if you have an extremely credible team that's really talented and that is so good that they could run an in-house, algorithm based on their insights. Well, hell, if you can get them to release information for X price, then a whole lot of people are going to pay for it, right? And it's worth something. And so on the research side, I would argue that our work, the people themselves, and I don't want them, I'd be sad if they all left and went and worked at hedge funds tomorrow. And they probably some of them will get wrecked. It's a market specific thing. If everybody had left in 2019, the majority of folks would have, not done well because of the market. So this team that we have is they're top notch, right? And so they could go out and do a whole number of things, from investing, in tokens, to investing in projects, to, you name it, running their own, independent Ben Thompson type newsletters. What's beautiful is they've come together. They're incredibly good. And I would argue by far the best in terms of regular output and insights in the industry. And so therefore, there's a clear qualitative difference between the product and anything else that's available for a reasonable price point without bringing somebody onto your team. So my sale is just, well, hell, instead of spending $100K plus on your analysts, spend X with us, and it's a lot cheaper, or just augment it. And it's like having two bodies. That pitch is resonating. And so our business is doing well and we're growing. On the journalism side, for the most part, we don't, we charge in the form of sort of typical advertising in association with the brand. We're very selective. We've only had a few dozen sponsors, and we charge a direct rate, so you're paying us, and we have partnerships with those folks. So we've kept the quality of sponsors high, as I think you guys do direct sales, and it's similar. You choose your sponsors, and you kind of stand by them. So the bottom line is the folks who are consuming the content for free are paying via their attention and the brand association. And then on the other side, so to answer your question directly, it's hard to get people to pay for journalism, right? And so for us, it's so impactful in terms of how we establish a brand that very many people see, that's super credible, that they're aware of, and that acts as a top of funnel halo and awareness meter and credibility establisher and comfort establisher. So down the road, when we have those really deep insights that consistently, day in and day out, predictably, allow you to make decisions, whether it be research or in the long run, more of a data and services business. And I'll obviously stay intentionally vague there, but that folks will trust and recognize your brand, and therefore be more likely and warm to, hey, would you like to work with us, for a year or more? And it's going to be a big number, but we're the information brand that you want to associate with.
But
journalism in and of itself is really hard to make into a business model right now, as you know.
What's the thing that you're most excited about for this year with respect to new developments of the company, right? The team seems to be on autopilot, hit their stride in terms of ongoing coverage.
Yeah.
What's next?
So the biggest is it's really getting a team that's incredible, working together, firing on all cylinders, and then putting a bunch of stuff out there to allow them, exposure. So it's, we need to market the product, right? To date, it's been organic. we're having an event during Blockchain Week, as are, other folks. And so getting the team out there to share their knowledge more broadly, and we'll film that and share it. But we're introducing a product this year called the Block Explorer that will be more Crunchbasey, PitchBooky, CB Insights. Like it's an actual product versus just versus a website. And so we're excited about that, and that's later this year. It's going to be different than what Masari or some of the other folks who are different than you do, so we want to become a one-stop information shop for brands' needs, from sponsorship to research to deeper custom information.
Mike, thank you so much for joining. I think most people that watch this interview are probably going to get a very different sense for how you operate than if they were just interacting on a day-to-day basis on Twitter. Although you're going to have to answer one final question.
Please.
You've gone back and forth on deleting tweets.
Yeah.
So what is it? Are you going to keep your tweets? Are they in some historical archive, or are you going to continue to delete them every 48 hours or so?
Yeah. So I view tweets as an ephemeral communication method. And I would prefer to be able to delete them without ruffles, meaning, if they're just pithy, chill, nobody's going to care if they get deleted. But it's so weird to have all your thoughts out there, just public. Like when people who aren't tweeters talk to me, like my wife or my family, and they're like, "What? All that stuff's up there? Like, what's wrong with you?" So a normal person would be like, "Delete that." My God. And then the folks in the crypto community, and specifically Bitcoiners, are like, "You heretic, you don't leave that stuff up there immutably. And do you really believe what you say?" And well, yeah, I do. I just don't think it needs to stay up there for posterity. So, I'm going to leave my tweets up for now. The majority of them, I've been going about a week and a half. I'm going to give it a little bit longer horizon so that people can enjoy. And I'm going to try and be more chill this year, but we'll see. I'll probably last another week.
Truer words never spoken. At M Dudas. Mike, thanks again for joining.
Thank you.
Hope everyone enjoyed this conversation, and check out the blockcrypto.com if you want to read more of the team's day-to-day journalistic pieces alongside CoinDesk. So
thanks, buddy.
Until next time, thanks for tuning in. Peace.